Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Badgerland Birding Podcast, bringing you birding news and stories from the Badger State and beyond. Today, we're with Pete and Jed from Houston Audubon. They're doing some great work down in Texas with conservation. So excited to hear more about it. How are you guys doing?
Doing good.
Great. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course. So, why don't you give us a little bit of background about Houston Audubon, and then you can tell us about some of the work that you guys are doing.
Yeah. Yeah. My name's Jed Aplaca. I'm the president and CEO of Houston Audubon and proud to be with the organization just actually not very long, just for the last year. But the Houston Audubon is actually, we are a local chapter of the National Audubon, but we are kind of unique that we are our own independent 501(c)(3), and we are an accredited land trust. And we've actually been in existence over 50 years. I believe it's 56 years, I think, as we've been around. So started by some very passionate people in the Houston area, and do a lot of things. Biggest thing is we do a lot of land conservation. We have over 4,100 acres of property that we protect. Our mission is protecting birds and bird habitat in the greater Houston area. So that includes kind of 11 county area surrounding Harris County, which is where Houston is. Most of the property we own is in Galveston County along the coast. And if you're familiar with that, it's a very special place. We have some very popular sanctuaries that people usually visit, especially during spring migration. We have High Island, where we have our sanctuaries there, and then Bolivar Flats Shorebird Sanctuary too, which is a special place too.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I'm Pete. I'm Pete Deichmann. I'm the land conservation director of Houston Audubon. So I'm actually based down on the coast, out of High Island. So we actually get to see the birds during spring migration right before you guys do up there in Wisconsin. So our peak is around April, and then it starts to die off, and we send them your way. Um,
Appreciate that. Thanks for taking care of them. I've had the chance to visit High Island once, and it was a little before warbler season, but you guys have that great rookery out there. So it was cool seeing all the baby egrets and that kind of stuff too. So there's always something to see out in High Island, it seems.
Yeah, where the roseate spoonbills nesting at that time
Yeah,
too, and
yeah.
yeah,
yeah, that's another really cool, interesting story that, born out of our land acquisition conservation work. That most of High Island started as a oil boom town back in the early 1900s. And it was eventually, we acquired several hundred acres in and around there, but it wasn't until Houston Audubon actually acquired that property and that pond, which was man-made, and the water was used for the oil and gas industry. But it wasn't until we acquired it that the birds actually started nesting on it.
Hmm.
So that's another great story.
Definitely. So can you guys touch about some of the new land acquisitions you're working on?
yeah. Pete will probably give a little bit more details, but Bolivar Flats Shorebird Sanctuary is over 1,200 acres, right at the at the tip of Bolivar Peninsula. It's actually in Galveston County, and it's a very special area. And there's just a small piece of property that had not been acquired by Houston Audubon yet, which we surround kind of the entire area. And Pete can kind of tell the story of how it works in with everything else.
Yeah, well, Bolivar Flats is it's really cool. It's got everything you want. It's got history. So Bolivar Flats is Bolivar Flats because of the creation of the North Jetty. They constructed the North Jetty back in 1898, back when Galveston Island was, it was the Wall Street of the South. So there was major commerce happening through the port of Galveston, but they were having issues with all of that commerce because they lacked a deep water port, because there's constant sediment that was running east to west along the Gulf, coming out of the Mississippi River, coming out of the Sabine River, and it would clog up that port, so they would actually have to ferry all the goods back
goods and
and
everything.
forth with ferry vessels. So big group, big names in Galveston got together, Moody, Kempner, others, and they actually lobbied Congress for the funding to build the North Jetty. And once that was done, it it altered those longshore currents. So it acted like a giant catcher's mitt. And what it does is it catches all that sediment, which includes tons of nutrients that feed all of the invertebrates that the birds are feeding on. So it's unique in that man-made structure actually did something really good for wildlife. And now it's it's part of the Western Hemisphere Shorebird Reserve Network. It's a site of international importance. National Audubon's ranked it as a globally important bird area. It's just fantastic. We have, on any given day, 10 to 15,000 individual birds across, 20 to upwards of 50 species could be using it, which really says a lot about the food resources that are available for those birds on a daily basis, which is incredible. And then, you get into winter and migration. We have, a very large, or not a very large, but a percentage, about 3 to 5% of the global American avocet population that is using that site as their wintering grounds, which is incredible. And then those numbers can skyrocket during spring migration. We get several, 500,000 birds are using that sanctuary on a yearly basis. So, yeah, I could talk about Bolivar Flats all day long.
Yeah, so you talked about how, all that nutrients kind of ends up there and gets deposited. Is that something that at this point is just happening naturally, or does that have to get managed in any way to kind of make sure that that continues?
It's happening naturally. So the jetty they created is actually 5 miles long. There's a small boat cut at 2 miles, and we're still way far away from that 2 miles. So the shoreline has actually accreted, grown by several hundred yards over the last 100 years. And it's just building up mudflats, it's building up marsh, it's building up dunes and coastal prairie. So there's quite a variety of habitats. And that's what we've been working since the mid 80s to protect.
Yeah, I think it's kind of naturally doing all that. We don't necessarily manage for that part, but we manage kind of for the protection a lot of that. We do have, a vehicle barrier that kind of stops vehicles from driving on the beach at a certain point to kind of protect the habitat, closer to the jetty. We do regular beach cleanups with a lot of, with our organizations, with volunteers and others to kind of, because along with that current, you get a lot of trash and everything that too picks up. So, not direct management of the nutrients and everything else, but direct management to keep it clean and healthy.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
The avocets, every time I see them, I'm amazed that they can get enough food with
Yeah.
that delicate looking bill. I like it just fascinates me because even shorebirds like willets that have like, stronger looking bills, like
Mhm.
they're always cruising for food. So the avocets, I'm just like, what an incredible bird.
Yeah, they are interesting with that thin bill, and it amazes me too, even just their legs, and they look like their legs are just like sticks, and it's hard to imagine how they support themselves, but it works.
Yeah, yeah, it has worked for them so far. So
Yeah,
clearly they're doing something right.
yeah. So, talking about the one piece that we're looking at acquiring, it's a small piece. It's about 50. It was a piece of property that wasn't acquired by Houston Audubon because of some land dividing interest and everything else. And so it was about 53 acres originally that was owned by a developer, and it was platted to be broken up into home lots, and they were going to build homes, and it's surrounded on three sides by our sanctuary. And they started putting utilities and other things in. And so Houston Audubon has actually been actively working to try to purchase this land for a long time. And we finally got to a point earlier this year in January where the developer was able to agree to, a price that we could get under contract and work to fundraise for that. So it's two pieces of property. It's one big piece, 53 acres, but we divided it up into two phases. So we had kind of a good goal that we could work towards, and we've actually accomplished phase one, which was acquiring that first 27 acres or so. And then we just have the last piece to fundraise for. And so the first piece, we actually did a lot of kind of private foundations and others, in addition to some of our own endowment funds and others that we use to kind of make that purchase. And that first piece was $3 million. The second piece is also $3 million. What was going to be built on there were 30 home lots, right, Pete?
Yes.
30 total. So, we thought, us and our board thought it was super important to be able to protect this property and acquire that, because even though it's kind of a small piece of property, the effects that could potentially leak out from that small development into the sanctuary and kind of affect the sanctuary, invasive species that could come from the landscapes and introduce there. The lighting from the homes and other things could affect the birds during migration and other times. And just a general litter and contamination that could come. And so that's kind of where we are. And so we're actually, we're kind of pushing more of the public campaign right now to get the word out that we're raising funds for this. We are about halfway there. We've got about 1.5 million of the three that we're looking at for this second phase. Our goal is to get that done by the end of December. So we've got a steep goal to work towards, but it's amazing to see the support that we've gotten from the public and from everybody involved. I mean, we've with those donations, a lot of it was individual donations. There were some big foundation donors who helped us out too, but I believe there was it was about 34 or 35 states that had actually donated from. I made a map and I was trying to figure out where everybody was donating from, and we didn't get anybody from like North and South Dakota yet, or Kansas. So
they got to step it up.
We need to get those states involved. We had gotten people from Hawaii and Alaska to donate already, even a couple countries from Germany and Australia. And so it's amazing. When you go out to Bolivar Flats in the spring, when migration is going on, you meet people from all over the world there. It's pretty amazing to see people down there and enjoying the birds that come through that area. And so we really wanted to impress how important all that is to everybody.
Yeah, for sure. Is there I'm assuming there's a link people can go to if they want to donate?
Yeah, it is HoustonAudubon.org/protect Bolivar. We can share that with you.
Yeah,
too,
we'll put a link in the description if people, want to check it out.
Yeah.
I'm going to check it out right now.
And if they're following our social media or our website or anything, that's easy to find to HoustonAudubon.org. Everything is right up on the front there.
Cool. I'm gonna share my screen real quick. You guys have that nice map up there for people that are watching the
Oh yeah, awesome.
Yeah, so you can see that like it really is just like a puzzle piece, to slide in there like the last little bit of protected area. So I feel like being able to visually see it is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's a very helpful map, and I think when we use that, it helped a lot of people understand. And the way we tried to show it was, we've been working since 1997 was the first acquisition of that. One of our board presidents at one point, who kind of started this whole thing back in the 80s, Stenny Metters, she had gone down there in the 80s and saw these kids riding around on their bikes dirt bikes and other things, and they were scaring up the birds and everything. And she's like, something really needs to be done.
Yeah. Was she in one of the videos you guys sent?
Yeah, she was in the latest video I sent
Yeah, there's
too.
a couple of videos I'll link in the description too if
Yeah,
people want to, see more. And there's really nice videos of like avocets and stuff in there too.
yeah,
So a lot of cool stuff to check out there. But
yeah,
yeah, I love that this has so much information. You got the red knots in there too.
yeah,
Nice.
yeah. And that's another reason is the importance for, some really important birds, those threatened birds like the red knot, the black rail, least tern. What else am I missing, Pete?
Piping plover. Yeah,
Oh, piping plover. Yeah,
there's 3 federally listed species and that regularly call Bolivar Flats home. Eastern black rail being the most recently listed. Texas is currently the stronghold for eastern black rail, and we have a breeding population of Bolivar Flats, and red knots are using it during migration. We get Central and Great Lakes piping plovers wintering. Um, it's a great place.
So looking at that map, you talked about how much of a difference it would make if that little land is developed and kind of the effects of that. Do you kind of see that as a model for conservation in other places, trying to get the whole piece and not letting kind of these little development patches make a big impact? Is that something you'd like to see elsewhere?
yeah. I think when you're looking at conservation land, I think the important part is to kind of you obviously want to look at first, where can you protect make the biggest impact. And then sometimes you need to drill down a little bit later on and see, where are these little missing pieces that need to be kind of filled in later on. So I think that was the easy part of this was there was these big pieces that could really be protected. And, that small piece, we definitely been working on it for a while. It was just, the hard part is Bolivar is very interesting. You've been down there. It's an interesting spot right along the coast, and it's people like to spend their time on the beach, and there's nice beach houses and everything else, which we don't mind people enjoying that also. But it's such an important area to protect. So yeah, I think looking at these small key pieces, we have not only do we have some property down on the coast there, but we also have some property kind of north of Houston. And if you're familiar with the Houston area at all, it is growing like crazy. So there are constantly, new housing developments going in. And, I just read in the newspaper today that there's like 1,800 homes going down in League City, which is being built in League City soon. And so we're often looking. There's several other conservation organizations in Houston that kind of work towards this goal, but we're looking at these areas that are um, um, potentially good areas to protect. Another big issue, if you're not familiar with Houston, is it floods and we get storms, and there are a lot of concerns with those areas. So those are often areas that we look at, if homes can't be built on it, how can it be protected for wildlife, for habitat? That's another thing that we really try to push with this Bolivar Flats property. Inland from that, there are some homes, and protecting these wetlands and protecting these natural areas can help protect the people kind of further inland from storm surge and other issues that arise. So it's in some areas, depending where you're working there, it's hard to find good pieces of property to protect. And unfortunately, Houston Audubon's been doing at it for a while, and we've had a reputation of kind of building that conservation, these conservation properties in the area.
And I'll add to that a little bit. Being a small regional nonprofit, those are really important for protecting some of these smaller pieces on a greater landscape. So U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service wouldn't be interested in a small piece of property like this. Big organizations like the Nature Conservancy. So it really can play a big part, piecing these little pieces together that make a big impact.
Yeah, I think it's cool to have the opportunity for people to donate to a cause like this because I feel like a lot of times it's just, birders, we're always kind of asking, look, what can we do to help protect birds? And I feel like protecting land is one of the biggest things. But like the average person, aside from making your backyard as bird friendly as possible, we don't have a
Mhm.
lot of control over what gets protected. And more often than not, it's, our favorite birding location gets cut in half because like development happens. Or,
Yeah.
there's a nature center by my house that it used to all be like open land and now it's getting developed with,
Mhm.
houses and stuff. So we're kind of seeing that. So it's great that, you guys are working to protect the land and stuff down there. Is that something that other Audubon groups might be able to do as well as start doing the land stuff? Or do you need special like certifications and is there a lot of requirements for that?
We're kind of unique in that it almost started out that way, that Houston Audubon had really pushed that. Many of the other Audubon organizations, I think they do a lot of advocating and partnering with um, um, conservation properties. I know. Let's see. I was out in South Carolina this year, and the I didn't get to go. I think the Audubon chapter out there, and I can't remember what it was called at the time, but they were partnering with like the state, like they would help to acquire the property, but then they would sort of turn it over to the state to manage it, and so they can actively, depending on what their organization, their capacity is. I think there's a lot of opportunity for that. And so it sort of depends on the Audubon chapters and kind of what they have going on. I think all of them are a little bit different.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
and once you own the property, it's yours to take care of. So it's absolutely other organizations could follow the model we've kind of I wouldn't say perfected over the last 56 years, but we're passionate about protecting the land in this region. So I'm sure that passion lives in other organizations too. It's just going for it and getting that land while you can and keep it for the birds.
Yeah, it's likely only going to go up in price in the future, right? So it's probably better to buy it sooner
Yeah,
rather than later. Can you
yeah.
guys give me a little bit of history about how you got into birding in the first place? Jed, we can start with you and then we'll go to you, Pete.
Sure. I grew up in Hawaii, so we had some cool birds there.
Yeah, no kidding.
No, um, I grew up. I've always been a big fan of nature and everything involved in nature. And I don't have it in front of me, but one of my favorite books from when I was younger was Hawaii's Birds, which was published by Hawaii Audubon Society, and that really got me into birding when I was younger. Although my professional path originally kind of took me more into botany and other things. Birding had always been a big passion of mine. I had participated in some internships with the Nature Conservancy of Hawaii, and we got to go to some of the most beautiful places that people don't ever get to go. And that I remember going to the Big Island, to Hakalau National Wildlife Refuge, and we were looking at the birds, and there was probably like five endangered birds in one tree there in Hawaii, and it was amazing. And it really kind of touched me off on how important it is to protect it. I was always thinking, are my kids or my grandkids going to be able to see these birds? And I would like to see them. I'd like to give them that opportunity to see these amazing things that are out there. And then I started working I went to BYU Hawaii, starting out school, and I worked at the Natural History Museum there, and we used to get all the um, dead animals, and it was a lot of birds that came from the Honolulu Zoo. And so I had a lot of really close interaction with birds and you know, uh, dealing with their skeletons and how we mounted them and to study skins and all that sort of thing. So it was really cool. And I was able to do that and continued on. And I'd always been big into birding, excuse me, and moved to Houston with my wife, who was from the Houston area. And I started working with Houston Parks and Recreation. And although it wasn't directly with birding, I was able to get to kind of a natural resources manager position, where working with the city of Houston had over 38,000 acres of property that they managed. And so there was a great opportunity for us to really work towards protecting even the land that the city had owned. And so that part of that was studying the birds and understanding what type of birds use these properties and how important they are. And then that led me to another position down in Pasadena as the Parks and Recreation Director there, and then just recently to Houston Audubon. So I'm very excited to be, working where I am now, and this has always been a passion of mine. And we were out. I was down in High Island yesterday, and I got to go birding with one of our staff down there at Smith Oaks, and I think we got 23 species, including a bunch of cool warblers like the northern parula, and saw yellow-throated. We didn't find. We were looking for a black-throated gray that had been reported down there, but we didn't see it.
Nice.
But anyway, so it's fun. It's always been a passion. I think I love just going out and finding the birds and just seeing what they're doing and enjoying their beauty and everything. I mean, that's been a passion of mine for a long time.
Awesome. Pete?
Yeah, well, Derek, I'm not going to lie to you. I got dragged into birds kicking and screaming.
We're happy to have you anyways. Okay.
Yeah, I grew up, I grew up loving the outdoors. Grew up hunting and fishing, all that. Wanted to be a wildlife biologist, but I wanted to do something quote unquote cool, right? I grew up watching Steve Irwin wrestle alligators and catching snakes, so that's what I wanted to do. But my first job out of college was looking for dead birds as a result of wind energy development out west, and I justified it because they were dead, right? And thought maybe I'd move on, but instead I met my wife, who was a birder, and it slowly blossomed from there. And I've come to appreciate them greatly. They touch all corners of the globe. They know no borders. They're beautiful. They're constantly changing plumages, and it's. I also think of them as I've always had a kind of a soft spot for the little guy in the fight, right? I feel like they're the little guy, and I want to help. And if you help birds, you're helping everything else. You make a better world for birds. It's better for those herps. It's better for the mammals. It's better for the humans. So here I am.
Do you have a spark bird that got you into it, or was it just like kind of everything?
I do. And it was a white-breasted nuthatch, and it was right after I got my first pair of binoculars, my own pair of binoculars, and my wife took me out to practice with them, and we did our first checklist. And at the end, I thought, well, this is kind of fun. It's kind of like a little treasure hunt every time you go in the woods. It's a great activity to keep your mind busy. It's a great reason to travel. It's a lot of fun once you start doing it.
Yeah, I'm glad we could get you over to our side. Are you guys familiar with the red-vented bulbuls in the Houston area?
Yes.
Because when I was over there, I didn't know about them, and somebody told me, like, oh, there's this population of red-vented bulbuls. I believe they're from Asia.
Asia? Yeah.
Yeah, and they can be found in the Houston area. So I went to one of the neighborhoods and walked around and was able to see a couple, and they're really beautiful. Like, I know they're not native, but like, what an interesting little population that you guys have there. What's your feelings on them? Are they causing damage? Are they fine at the moment? Like, where are we at with those?
It's interesting. I was familiar with the red-vented bulbul because those were common in Hawaii also.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
And in Hawaii, they cause a lot of fruit damage on like papayas and other things. So when I got to Houston and I learned that there was a population here, I was like, oh, that's really interesting, because I felt like it was a little. I mean, we don't get super cold winters, but I thought
you didn't bring them from Hawaii, did you?
No, I didn't bring any with me, but
that's good.
It's been interesting because I've known about that for several years, and I couldn't tell you the exact they're not causing the same damage that obviously they were in Hawaii and other things, but the population that is here, I don't think it's growing as much as they thought it would, as some of these invasive birds are. It's sort of kind of stayed in these kind of couple locations in the Houston area and hasn't really expanded a whole lot. And it is kind of interesting to see them because it's not a bird you would normally think, being down here.
No, but like as a birder who likes quirky experiences, I thought it was pretty fun to go,
Yeah.
walk around the neighborhood
Yeah.
and look for them and just
I
try
mean,
to like pick them out.
yeah, definitely a cool bird to find because it's kind of a one-off down there.
Mhm.
Yeah. Pete, do you have any thoughts on the bulbuls?
Well, I grew up in St. Louis, so we have the English house sparrow, which is kind of similar, right? Just that really.
Well, not as decimating or damaging as that, but
Um, no, I think I agree. It's a cool bird to have. It's almost kind of a badge of honor.
it's a Houston specialty and
We'll
Yeah.
see if
maybe California at
yeah,
some points, but
if it ever becomes a problem, we'll have to work that into our management plans.
Yeah,
yeah,
and I think that's the interesting part is I've known about it probably for the last 10 years or so. And as long as I've known about it in the Houston area, it hasn't seemed to really get out of hand.
yeah,
And
it's
I'll
probably something you just like keep an eye on, right? Like, hey, those are
Yeah,
still good, right? Like
yeah,
we're not getting overrun by those.
yeah.
and I wanted to make the point that we also do lots of urban bird surveys in and
Mhm.
around the Houston
Yeah.
area. So, we are collecting data on not just red-vented bulbuls, but all other species in the Houston area too. So yeah, we're watching that trend closely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's one that I've noticed is becoming more common is the scaly-breasted munia.
interesting. Yeah.
And I've noticed that I'm here at our Edith L. Moore Nature Sanctuary, which is kind of our headquarters. We have a population that hangs out here all the time, and I've seen reports of like all over the Houston area, and I feel like that one has been. I've actually seen some in my house. I live on the southwest side of Houston, and I feel like that one's become a little more common. But that's a little finch-looking guy that doesn't really seem to do a lot of damage
Yeah, I
or
know they can
good.
get in big groups though, because that was a bird. I lived in Louisiana for a couple of years, and that was one that I
Mhm.
was trying to see for the first time. And it was kind of tough to find down there. I ended up getting invited to somebody's house where they were trying to band them to do some
Yeah.
research.
Hmm.
And there was a big group of them there. They were pretty shy, but you can get
Yeah.
like 10, 20, probably more than that in a group at a time. So I imagine they
Yeah.
could kind of just decimate a feeder setup in not that long if there's a huge.
Yeah. You're right. They are really shy because the ones we have here, like I'll walk out and I'll hear them all the time, but not necessarily see them. But sometimes it's pretty quiet here at our sanctuary, and they'll come out and they'll be on the feeders and the bird bats and everything, and it's fun to watch them. I mean, they're a cool looking bird.
Yeah, it's changing landscape all the time with, the
Yeah.
species that are around and at what point is something just, part of the ecosystem versus something that's causing problems and we should try to do something about it. Do you guys have the monk parakeets in down there too?
We do.
Yes, we
Okay.
Um,
do.
yeah, yeah, you can see them, around the Texas city, sometimes in certain places in Galveston.
Yeah, kind of on the southeast side of Houston. There's a pretty good population of monk parakeets.
Yeah, that's one that always fascinates people because, they're just not expecting to see
Yeah,
parrots, especially in Chicago. When I tell
yeah,
people you can find parrots in Illinois, they're like, what are you talking about? So that's another one that always fascinates people.
yeah, definitely. When I first saw him here, I was like, "Am I seeing what I think I'm seeing?" And it was really cool.
Yeah. When you were growing up in Hawaii, Jed, is a lot of the stuff that was around when you were a kid, is some of that gone now, like the akikihi? I know there's
You
like
know,
one left in the wild.
yeah, growing up, you really don't see a lot of the native birds. Most of what you're seeing in the populated areas are exotic birds. There's the red-headed cardinal, there's the white-rumped shama. There's all sorts of zebra doves, all sorts of cool things that growing up I didn't care because it was a cool bird to look at. But then when I started learning about the um, change in population and how things have the honey creepers have gone extinct, and so many of are endangered. Probably one of the coolest ones I ever saw when I was younger it's called the Akia Poloao. I don't know if you've heard of that one. It's the one that has sort of the bottom bill is straight and the top bill is hooked. And it'll sort of use the bottom bill as kind of a woodpecker, and then it'll use the top one to pry things out. So
Oh, cool.
that one is really cool. And then once you just see one of those bright EEVs, those super bright red birds with the really long curved bill, yeah, that's the Akia Poloao. That one, I've seen that one, which is really neat.
Yeah, that's a cool looking one.
Yeah. And then the EEV is the one.
This guy?
Yeah. Once you see one of those, I mean, you're hooked for sure.
Yeah.
You see,
I mean,
that's kind of like your scarlet tanagers you'd see over here, and just that real bright color.
yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. But it was interesting. One of the birds that I was almost kind of a spark bird. It was just a super interesting bird because the shorebirds and the seabirds always interested me. And so, that's why I like spending time at Bolivar Flats. But we had, what were they? No, what it was I think I was riding my bike to work, and I worked at the Natural History Museum at BYU, and I found this dead brown bird on the side of the road, and I picked it up, and my professor knew a lot about birds, so I took it, and he was like, "Oh, that's a Bulwer's petrel." And I was like, "Oh, that's random that I would find this tiny little petrel on the side of the road, dead." And so we put it in. We kept it as a study skin, even though I found it on the side of the road. But it was, there's some interesting, just these seabirds and these shorebirds that are out there and spend so much time in the sea.
Yeah, for sure. Hawaii is a place I've never been, but I definitely want to go and
Yeah,
try to see all the native stuff and then probably all
and
the non-native stuff
and
too.
the exotic stuff. I
Yeah.
remember, I think we saw some cockatoos or something once in a valley, and it's just it's fun. It's fun to see all that stuff, even though it's not native.
Yeah. So question for you both kind of working in, the conservation field and all that. What is something you wish was different about bird conservation?
You go first, Pete.
On the hard question,
Throwing him on the hot seat. He's like
um,
liking birds. It's just difficult to pretend.
I mean, the big problem for every organization, whether it's every conservation organization, whether it's birds or deer or whatever, it's funding. I wish there was more funding available, and um, it's always hard to do everything that we want to do, and not just in land acquisition and management, which is kind of what I work mostly on, but also for education and advocacy. It's working on that public sentiment and trying to really get across what I said earlier, that what's good for birds is good for you too. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I really echo what Pete said. It's that obviously the funding is the hardest part of birding, and then really making sure people understand why it's important. And we have some great education programs that we do, and a lot of outreach that we do, to really kind of get that message out there too. So it's an important part of our organization is not only are we conserving the land, but we're also trying to educate people and let people know that, hey, there are all these cool birds around you, if you just kind of take the time to look at them sometimes. And so our team really does a great job of that, but it really all comes down to funding. If without the funding, you can't do the protection, you can't have the staff that you really need to take care of all these things. Birders, I think, are often a very interesting sort too, kind of depending on where along the line you stand. There are kind of the extreme birders who are really they just want to see birds, and that's their biggest thing, which is really cool. I mean, I like to see birds, and I like to go see as many as I can too. But then you have these really great birders who are like, let me do something that's important. Let me help out as much as I can. So we have a great group of people here in the Houston area that really support us. Our board, our volunteers, all those people who really do that. But it is just kind of a really great area, and um, yeah, it's just hard to reach everybody as much as you can.
Yeah, and for people that travel down to the Houston area, I know obviously the flats are great to visit, High Island great to visit. What are a
Yeah,
couple other places that should be on people's must-see lists if they're traveling to the Houston area?
you know, one of the parks that often there's a couple of kind of big parks in Houston that really have some interesting birds sometimes. There's one called Cullinan Park, which is on the southwest side of Houston. It's in Sugarland, and there was a snail kite that was hanging out there for
That's cool.
a few weeks, which is really odd because they hadn't seen one there for a while. And it was a lot of people got to, like, if you were to look at the eBird checks list, maybe for, I don't know if it was September, maybe Cullinan Park was like one of the top spots of eBird checks list because everybody was going out to see that snail kite. Um, the Linkins have started moving in over there recently in the last several years. There's a good blend of kind of wetland habitat along with forest and everything else there. Um, and that's kind of where you see some of these really interesting birds is where you get that diversity of habitat. Our Edith Elmore Sanctuary, it's small, it's only about 17, 18 acres here on the west side of Houston, kind of right in the middle of urban Houston, is an awesome place to see birds too, especially during spring migration. We've got really easy trails to access, bird feeders. I mean, we were last Friday, we were out there and, there were probably about 4 to 6 different species of warblers as we were just sitting there seeing what was coming through. And so it was really great to kind of do that. El Franco Lee Park is another one on the south side. Sheldon Lake State Park in that area is also good. So there's some really good areas around the Houston area. If you go to our website, you can see where we do some of our bird surveys. Some of our bird surveys are in kind of these really cool parks that'll have some interesting stuff. But what I learned working with Houston Parks and Recreation too was, the birds just aren't in these parks. They're everywhere. You just have to actually go and look for them. And that's what we didn't get a lot of, we had a lot of parks that had some cool habitat, but on the eBird hotspots, there wasn't that many bird species. So, well, are people just not seeing the birds, or is nobody going there? And so we would often just go there, and we would find a lot of different species that really just aren't there. So there's a lot of habitat, and especially because Houston and this area is right along those migratory flyways, we get a ton of things coming through.
Yeah, I'll put a plug in for the National Wildlife Refuge system down
Yeah,
here too. We have Brazoria National Wildlife Refuge that's to the southwest of Houston, and then Anahuac or Jocelyn Nungare
That place is really
National
cool.
Wildlife
The
yeah,
Refuge.
shoveler loop there,
yeah,
the ridiculous shorebird views and just
yeah.
like an
Ridiculous.
overwhelming amount of birds there.
And
That's a good spot.
not just the refuge, but there's a lot of rice farming. So farmers that still have flooded fields in the spring, great, and freshly mowed fields, great place for buff-breasted sandpipers. In those still flooded fields, you can get Hudsonian godwits and just crazy numbers of shorebirds, whimbrels, and long-billed curlews, and the list goes on.
Yeah, that's a really good spot.
Yeah, Jed, I think to what you were saying about, some of those places being good, but they're not being reports. I definitely feel like if one place gets hot, at least by me, like everyone's gonna go there,
Yeah,
and then they kind of forget about the other places, and then one person goes there, finds a rare bird, and then everyone goes there for a little
yeah,
bit. So it's
yeah,
good to space out your birding and just check out a spot that maybe nobody's gone to, or that
yeah.
hasn't been visited in a while.
Yeah, I've always been like that. It's like I see a park, and let me go see what's there, and let's find out what birds might actually be in there. I may not see anything, but at least you visited and kind of gone to see what's out there. I think that's the great thing about birding too, is just being able to get out in the outdoors and enjoy nature. I think that's why a lot of us enjoy it also.
Yeah, it's also a good excuse to just go out. Like, oh, I can
Yeah,
go, see what birds are out there. But I feel like that's a thing that as you spend more years birding, you want to go find the stuff nobody's found. You're like, let me go to
yeah,
the place nobody's been because I think this should be there. Like, I have a hunch about that. Where when you start, you're like, I want to go where the rare stuff is. Like, that guy just found that. I want to go
yeah,
find that. It's kind of a thing you develop, I feel like, over the years.
yeah. It's like now I want to go find. I want to be the one that everybody's following, right?
Yeah, I knew there was a shift when I was with my friends and they were looking for some Franklin's gulls and like a mix of other gulls, and I was excited about it. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna pick these gulls out of this bunch. Or when you start, you're just like, I don't want to look through that flock of gulls. Like that's
Yeah,
terribly overwhelming. So there's definitely some shifts you get the longer you have
yeah,
been birding.
yeah. We have some of our staff members who always find interesting birds. Wyatt, who's down on the coast. I mean, he's great at finding stuff. I don't know how he does it.
Yeah, and I feel like there's certain people that specialize in certain birds too. Like there's one guy around here who always finds the Smith's longspurs. Like if they're around, like he'll always go check the farm fields. Like it's his thing that he likes to do. Where I'm like, I feel like if he wasn't around, we just wouldn't have reports of them. So you need those people that have the
Yeah,
relationship with certain birds too.
yeah,
Yeah, there's some familiar names on when you're looking through checklists on eBird that you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, and then you meet him in person. You're like, oh, you're that guy that
Yeah.
reports this. So some funny connections in the bird world for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Well, cool guys. Anything else you want to mention about, the new project or any other work you're doing?
I would say, check out our website, HoustonAudubon.org/protect Bolivar. We could use your help, helping
Yeah,
raise
or
money,
you,
protect, and just spread the word. Birds are cool.
yeah, exactly. Even if you can, or if you know somebody or your friends, share that info with them, and share the social media post, the website, or videos, whatever you can, and would love for you guys to come visit too. I mean, if anybody hasn't been down to High Island during spring migration or any of these other spots like Bolivar Flats, I mean, for a birder, you definitely need to try and visit those spots.
Yeah, I know people that listen are always looking for new spots to go to. So this is
Yeah,
one you should write down on the list. And they're also always looking for ways to help. So this is one way you can make a donation to a great cause and help protect some bird habitat that then you can go visit as well and
yeah,
appreciate while you're down there.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us, guys. And thanks to everybody for watching and listening to this episode of the Badgerland Birding Podcast.